everything have done has been good, and exciting, and articulate, and well worth listening to.
People are saying the woman is damned. Mr. Bird with the wave of the hand.
I still think Deep Purple are one of the best bands on the planet.
I just found them to be unique in their style, and I've always liked unique sounding music.
For me, Deep Purple in all their guises turned out the greatest lot of material that any band did.
When I leave, the glory turn, the people laugh, so she said burn.
The effect of the change in Deep Purple's lineup when Mark II fell apart was to introduce a different element into Purple's sound. Now you've got to remember Purple had established themselves as a very heavy band, classically and blues oriented, and when Ian Gillan and Roger Glover quit in 1973, suddenly Deep Purple were plunged into where do we go now?
Purple themselves, having spoken to them, have always maintained that they weren't in the slightest bit worried. To them it was just, well, we'll get another singer and we'll carry on, but I'm sure there must have been some sort of trepidation there.
I mean, they changed all the time. They were quite a fluid band, historically, and they did, I think, manage to maintain their signature sound, whoever the hell was in the band.
And by the time Gillan and Glover had left in 1972-73, Purple were one of the biggest bands on the planet. So to replace both of those two was going to be a difficult task. To replace Ian Gillan was almost an impossible one.
So where did they go? What did they look for? Did they look for an Ian Gillan clone? No, because that very much would mean following in the footsteps of Ian Gillan and coming up with someone who is a mere shadow of the great man himself. You can't replace like with like and expect things to carry on, and also expect people to say, well, the new guy's better than the old guy because he's mimicking the original. Do they go for an established singer, someone who already had a reputation? Well, Blackmore had already been badly bitten in a way with Ian Gillan and ego problems. So he decided to go for an unknown, and there was a guy in Redcar, David Coverdale, sent through a demo tape, sounded great, looked dreadful, but he could be adjusted and guided in a direction that Blackmore wanted to take Deep Purple.
When Coverdale first came down to auditions, he had this bouffant hairstyle that was nothing like the mane of hair that he had when he appeared in the first press lineups. He had a lazy eye, and he had what Lord refers to as some kind of caterpillar on his top lip. And Lord said, what's that? And apparently Coverdale in his Redcar accent, wait, me tash, man. Lord claims, he said, there's only room for one fucking moustache in this band, and it's fucking mine. And Coverdale was sent off to have his lazy eye corrected with surgery, and I think he was also made to lose a bit of weight, and his hair was grown, and when he'd come out the remodelling conveyor belt, here was this young lion-maned upstart with a great bluesy voice who blew everyone away, really.
David Coverdale was a good replacement in the fact that the music was shifting into that bluesier area. And if you listen to the music they did with David Coverdale, you'd find it hard to imagine Ian Gillan singing some of those songs. It was in that kind of bluesy, a little bit free, which I think was a band that Ritchie Blackmore admired, and obviously he admired Paul Rodgers, which is why he got Coverdale in a similar type of voice.
David Coverdale brought a very bluesy approach, which Ian Gillan doesn't have. A throatier, darker, deeper, soulful voice.
If you just replace somebody with somebody who's exactly the same, then you're not moving forward particularly. Getting David Coverdale in gave him that bluesy edge, which allowed him to, and the rest of the band, to move around different areas of music rather than just the rock music that they had been playing.
Turned around, I saw Ritchie throw his guitar up and you kick your drums to pieces, and I thought, I can't sacrifice a mic. And I thought, I'll kick the monitors off, you know. And I thought, can I afford it? I'll go off.
I think when David came in, he was really the new guy. He'd never really played on a stage before, a big stage, never toured. So I kind of felt responsible in a way to help him.
You didn't believe the war devil's burn. She said, "Cause the war you'll never learn. When I leave, the glory turn. The people laugh." So she said, "Burn."
The Gillan-Coverdale argument for Deep Purple is very similar. It splits rock fans right down the middle. Gillan was a great singer. I mean, he was a great heavy rock singer, and his work in Purple's fantastic. Coverdale's a totally different singer. He belts it out as well, but Coverdale sings the blues, but Gillan doesn't. Gillan was more of a rock shouter. David Coverdale had this sort of, Christ knows where he got it from actually, coming from Redcar, but he had this wonderful, rich, deep, bluesy baritone. And obviously it was very different, you know, to what Purple fans would have been used to.
Coverdale brought such substance to the band in such an unusual manner. Yeah, I think he was. I think he was very good, as was Glenn Hughes. And Glenn Hughes was probably as important, if not more important, than even Coverdale coming into the band.
I just found them to be unique in their style. And I've always liked unique sounding music. Whether I was a fan or not, I found them to be unique. Each individual had their own specific dynamic. And of course, when Smoke on the Water became a huge hit, it was the period of time when they asked me to join shortly after then. But I wasn't really a major fan of that kind of genre of rock.
To my way of thinking, Glenn Hughes is one of the most controversial choices Deep Purple ever made personnel-wise. Why? Because he was radically different to everything that Deep Purple had done before. His background, although rock, also had a more soulful and funky edge and feel to it. This is something that Ritchie Blackmore, as the leader of Deep Purple, was never comfortable with. So why on earth did Ritchie Blackmore choose someone who initially and immediately would be musically at odds with what he wanted to do, where he wanted to take the band, and where he felt most comfortable? He looked around. Glenn Hughes was the most exciting talent on the British scene at the time. He persuaded Glenn Hughes to join Deep Purple. Glenn wanted to sing as well as play bass because he was tremendous at both. But what Glenn wanted to do was always going to cause a problem with Blackmore. The Glenn Hughes choice, though, was amazing. It was brilliant because the guy brought so much ability and so much talent and so much input into the Purple role.
He brought in that high voice end to the voice that Ian Gillan had. So you had the best of both worlds then. And David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes' voices blended so well together. They complemented each other really well.
What do I think Glenn Hughes brought to the band? He brought bloody good bass playing, some good song ideas, and an exceptionally good voice. He was a bloody good addition, I think, to the band. Very studious and intelligent addition to the band at that time in their history. He's a great singer.
Glenn Hughes brought soul to the band, and he brought a rockiness that the band hadn't really envisaged, funk, and a classiness that, in a way, I don't think any of the others ever could have brought to the band. It was a highly unusual choice, and actually I think Deep Purple could have actually survived without David Coverdale being in the band, because Hughes was such a good singer. But they needed that front man, and with Glenn Hughes playing bass, that wasn't likely to happen.
I bought a foundation of groove. I bought more melody, probably in the vocal department. I bought harmonic textures in the harmonies. and I added a little swagger for sure on the low end. It would have been silly to have a bass player come in and be a Roger Glover. And people have called me the funky influence in Deep Purple. They knew that going into it. That's my background. I am that kind of bass player. I'm a soul singer in a rock band. And I think the difference and the beauty of Gillan and Glover, from Who Do You Think We Are to Burn, stands up amazingly.
I know that Ritchie liked the Cream sound with Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton doing the harmonies. So that was a sort of way of getting that in. It just made the sound different and interesting, and gave them a bit more lease of life.
I don't know whether the harmony vocals were necessarily an improvement. They were quite simply a different facet to the Deep Purple sound. The whole sound really had changed.
The harmonies worked superbly well for Deep Purple, and again opened up the horizons. With two singers you could do so much more. Musically, the pair hit it off superbly. I think the best example in the initial stages was the song Burn, when you had Hugh soaring away at the top half, while Coverdale underpinned it and took it through a very tremendously blues-style strength.
If you listen to the tension and the rub and the beauty of Coverdale and Hughes, it's very apparent on Burn. From my upper scale soulful registers to David's more bluesier things, a la Mistreated and Sail Away, and I come in and do my Glennisms, which make it a little different to the Gillan era.
Glenn is incapable of being on a stage or being in a studio with another singer without trying to upstage them. Now, it works up to a point because it means that you're bringing out the best in both, but Glenn is never satisfied with bringing out the best in somebody else. He wants to trash them. And it has to be said, most of the time, with Purple and subsequently, Glenn as a singer does upstage and outshine everybody. And he did it here. But while it worked, the harmonies were quite magnificent.
Whether the use of Coverdale's bluesy voice and Hughes' more soulful voice to interact is better than what they were doing with Ian Gillan is a very sore point for a lot of Purple fans. You know, there are arguments raging right now in pubs in the north of England about this. And it just comes down to personal taste. To me, you know, the combination of Hughes and Coverdale is manna from heaven. It's wonderful.
I think we were the only band from England that were doing the two lead singer thing, and you can't take that away. It's 30 years ago, and it really, my God, it's 32 years ago. It just holds up amazingly.
Glenn Hughes also brought a different style of writing to the band that was not particularly evident on Burn, but was more evident on Stormbringer, with the more sort of funky sound and the more not necessarily black, but it was definitely a more soulful and funky sound.
My influences in music and vocals have nothing to do with Deep Purple style of singing. My influences come from Detroit and Memphis in America, and it all comes from black singers, like Paul Rodgers would probably tell you, and David Coverdale also. We only listen to black singers. I think a lot of rock Englishmen in the 70s were very influenced by Otis Redding and Wilson Pickett and etc. So we skipped the blues period of the 60s and 50s, and we went for the 70s R&B singers. So I never really listened to a lot of English singers. Most of my heroes come from America.
Another facet to the Deep Purple sound that changed with this lineup was the fact that John Lord started to bring in synthesizers. He'd used them towards the latter end of the previous lineup on stage, but not on the studio recordings really. And when they did Burn, the first album with Coverdale and Hughes, there was a lot more synthesizer use on it, which again gave a different sort of sound to Deep Purple.
Some people might say that John Lord is the unsung hero of Deep Purple because obviously Ritchie gets a lot of the limelight as he's so amazing, but you know, John Lord's contribution is just it's out of this world. You know, is the inspiration for any rock Hammond player. It must be.
He was renowned for that heavy Hammond organ sound. Although he used that, he also incorporated the synthesizers and different sounds there, which gave the band a slightly different edge as well and a different facet.
His technique can range from anything from aggressive bluesy vamping to held sustained chords underneath Ritchie's solos, and also virtuoso style Hammond playing himself. The Hammond and the guitar, the sound of them is almost like one in Deep Purple. It's a sound that meshes together, and sometimes when they play in unison you can't pick the two sounds out. And also, John Lord's Hammond is sometimes so overdriven that it sounds like a guitar.
When Burn came out, it was Mark III's debut. Blackmore, Coverdale, Hughes, Lord, Pace, and many people wondered, could it match what had gone before? To my way of thinking, it's a classic. It's up there with Machine Head and In Rock as the best albums Deep Purple have ever made studio-wise.
You know, as far as Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, I think Burn stands up with a classic album like Machine Head simply because it is a bold step forward.
One of the key reasons why Burn is so good, because there's a very strong freshness about the album. It was clear that with the previous lineup they were getting a bit stale and they needed to be rejuvenated. And obviously bringing Coverdale and Hughes into the band, it gave the other three original guys a kind of new lease of life.
That particular unit, those particular people at that time, gave it all they could. I mean, they just thought, right, the band has got this history that precedes what we're going to do now. What we'll do now is we'll give this our best shot and make it a valid Deep Purple album, and they did.
It is two new guys coming in with three very accomplished musicians who have stamped their authority on a record immediately. It was a very confident rehearsal period, a very confident pre-production, and I wasn't thinking about finances or touring. All I was concerned about was making my mark in a supergroup as a bass player and second lead singer.
Burn, I mean, it kicks off with a riff that I think is perhaps only bettered by Space Trucking and Smoke on the Water.
You could say what you like about its likenesses to Gershwin, but it's a fantastic piece of heavy rock. I love the Baroque touches, the playing's superb, the energy's there. It's a vital introduction to a band that really were on the peak of their form with this album.
Cities ablaze, the stars on fire, woman's flames are reaching higher. We were fools, we called a liar. Yeah. Is Didn't believe the war devil's burn. She said, "Cause the war you'll never learn. When I leave, there's no return." The people laughed, so she said, "Burn." Warning came, no one came. The shaking was stood instead. When it came, no one was spared. Still here.
I mean, they tear into the new material, and there's some phenomenal stuff, so absolutely phenomenal stuff on Burn.
And you've got Lay Down, Stay Down, you've got Sail Away, which is very funky, absolutely. Might Just Take Your Life, You Fool No One. It's full of wonderful songs. It had a consistency, it had an ebullience, it had a feel, it had an energy, which perhaps Mark II had started to lose.
Every song on it is a classic. I think it sounds amazing. I think the playing's amazing. And I think that you can hear this is a band that are coming back after the implosion with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover, coming back and making a statement of intent.
It's a corking record.
Everybody seems very excited and fired up. Lyrically, it's different. Melody-wise, it's different, and it's just a different spectrum and a different sound to any of the albums that had gone before.
It's a very bright album. It's a very sharp album. It's full of good ideas, and it carries through right through the album.
It ends with one of the all-time great blues songs, Mistreated. What a wonderful, wonderful song that is, an epic.
It's what they were doing before, but with this kind of added bluesier influence, which would get funkier and funkier, over the next two Deep Purple albums. But it's up and out the blocks like that, and it's a storming rock record. It really is very, very good indeed.
Burn as a track, as a song, fantastic attack. It's like bang, it doesn't muck around. It came smack, out the speakers, wallop, into your face.
In the song Burn, we have this riff based on the G blues scale, which is similar to the Smoke on the Water riff actually, and it kind of comes in after the first beat of the bar, so you kind of get this springboard type of effect where the riff sort of bounces off the first beat, so you get... And because of this, it's sort of this syncopation, and it kind of makes the riff kind of quite exciting.
Burn, the song, is one of the great album openers of all time. I mean, it's got a furious riff from Ritchie Blackmore. Really good organ work from John Lord, and the whole band come flying in.
Suddenly you've got Coverdale charging in with that very blues voice that really starts to feel you're going to have a very portentous moment here. This is a great moment in rock history. You felt it right from the start. And then Glenn Hughes soars in and goes for high notes that are almost impossible to reach, but he reaches them. Not just reaches them, he actually opens them up and says, this is easy, this is wonderful, look what I'm doing here.
Morning came, no one came, the shaking was stood instead. When it came, no one was spared. Still here.
Then you've got that the first time you ever hear real vocal interaction on a Deep Purple song from two different singers, both as good as each other in their own right. You know, you've got that raucous blues from David Coverdale, and you've got that sweet funk from Glenn Hughes, and it works. It interacts perfectly.
The Glenn Hughes parts, written by Glenn Hughes. The Coverdale vocal lines, written by him. So you have this welding of two different vocalists putting their stamp on a song, and for me it just works.
But I think, to me, the best thing about the track Burn is Ian Paice's drumming, which is just absolutely phenomenal right the way through. It's like a little boy has just been let loose on a kit for the first time. And again, it's an example of how the band had some renewed vigour with the new blood in the band. And there's just a brightness and a freshness about it that still stands up now, 30 years later, I think.
Physically, it's quite demanding. The hardest thing is keeping the sweat out of my eyes, believe it or not. That's the hardest thing. It's fun, but it's not that difficult, other than if you're not feeling like 100%, it can get a bit tiring after half an hour.
Everything works. The vocals are superb, the riff is inspired, the playing is first class. I love the little Baroque section that John Lord throws into his keyboard solo, and Ritchie Blackmore's guitar solo with its chords arranged in fifths is unusual for him and very, very stylish.
The keyboard solo is great because it's almost kind of schizophrenic, really. We get this first G minor sort of trademark John Lord, Hammond, overdriven, bluesy, let's have it type of solo, and then it splits off into kind of the Baroque type Bach type chords that are all a fifth apart. And in that section, John Lord splits up into a kind of a piano with one hand, where he's playing quite a fast kind of Baroque style line. And then on top, we've got kind of a lead synth line with portamento, so it slides between the notes. So you kind of get this very fugal kind of two weaving melodies. So because all the chords are a fifth apart, it allows the kind of a sequence to occur so that you can kind of repeat each little phrase just a fifth apart from the last one. So we kind of get this sort of this sort of feeling of symmetry.
Mistreated is one of those moments in rock history when you hear something and you just feel the hairs in the back of your neck stand out.
Mistreated is one of the greatest Deep Purple songs.
It was an example of Ritchie Blackmore's great compositional skill, and it was a new direction the band had gone into.
It's up there with Child in Time as a classic.
First time I ever went to Ritchie's house, there was two guitars in a room and bass and a guitar, and he said, I want you to listen to this one idea I have for what was to become the Burn album. The very first idea, Without the Man, and he played the opening things to Mistreated, and I immediately started playing my style of bass playing, which is half-time, and it's the swagger, and it's not the notes I play, it's, again, the notes I don't play. And I knew it then at that point, we were going to make a record more suited to what I was hoping it would be, more bluesier, which Blackmore really liked. And he didn't want to make a Gillan type record. So for me, participating in the track Mistreated was great.
It's very bluesy, it's very slow, very deliberate, and it really does have a feel of classic blues. It's almost a number you could expect Muddy Waters to record, or Lightning Hopkins. It's got that feel. It's very epic. It's built on a very sturdy Blackmore riff. It allows Blackmore really to show his blues roots to perfection. And this is where Coverdale absolutely shines through. He has such a wonderful blues feel, and his voice on this track is magnificent.
David Coverdale was really finding his feet with the band at that time on the first album, but puts in a really great heartfelt performance. And it stands up today equally as good as any of the stuff they did with the Gillan and Glover lineup.
And I sang it with Rainbow as well, and there's such an emotion and such a power in that riff and in the melody and in the lyric that it's one of the classic Corich tunes.
A very simple kind of F sharp minor blues riff. First note A F sharp, and then the next riff kind of E F sharp, and then that riff is repeated, so you kind of get very simple, but kind of Blackmore adds these little inflections, and we get kind of like, instead of just it being, we get a really quick, but it's all part of the sound of his guitar really. So the whole riff is
and it's a great song because it worked when Deep Purple played it. It worked when Ronnie James Dio played it with Ritchie and Rainbow. It worked when Ronnie James Dio played it in the band Dio, and it worked when Coverdale did it with Whitesnake. So it's just one of those songs that, if it hadn't been such a classic tune, people wouldn't have played it.
I think Mistreated actually is probably a Ritchie Blackmore classic that Deep Purple interpreted incredibly well. Because if you listen to Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow in the early years, Ronnie James Dio sang it with great vigour. But there was something about the way Coverdale interpreted Mistreated, especially when you heard it live, that I don't think anyone else has ever really been able to pull off.
And I think one of the key things, as with a lot of Blackmore's compositions, is the simplicity. He keeps it simple with the structure. But on top of that, the actual playing is full of feel and full of invention. And it really makes for a classic piece.
Live was where that song really came into its all, because Ritchie could go off at the beginning and improvise, and then there would be the improvisations in the solo in the middle and improvisations in the solo at the end.
They could improvise till the cows come home, but never so much that it swamps what the song is, because they know the audience wants to hear the song. But they can improvise there. They just go out and do a whole different set. They're astonishing musicians. Live, they were always excellent. There couldn't be anything but. They were too highly schooled to be anything but excellent. And Ritchie Blackmore was a dream to watch. In his heyday, he was an absolute miracle maker on the guitar. He could do anything with it.
It didn't take them long to hit their stride. Glenn Hughes was a showman. He was, you know, he'd sung for Trapeze as well as playing bass. So now he was singing. He was the bass player for Deep Purple, but they used his vocals perfectly to mix up with Coverdale's. Coverdale obviously took a while to learn his stagecraft because he'd only been playing in bands in the sort of red car area.
Getting back to the studio thing, why we're probably a little bit on the subdued side on record is because when you're recording you find that there's one engineer and a couple of T-boys around, and it doesn't really inspire you to turn out your best. Whereas when you're on stage, you're playing to the people and they inspire you, obviously, you know. I suppose it's an ego thing really. You like to kind of basically show them what you know, and you get really inspired. You get a real exciting thing going with the crowd because they just turn you on.
They had to obviously do some of the older Purple songs. They did like Smoke on the Water and Space Trucking, and it's there where it started to lose a little bit of its control, a little bit of its direction.
I never got the feeling Coverdale and Hughes were particularly comfortable singing Smoke on the Water, etc., because they weren't their songs. And they did a manful job, they had a great stab at it, but the problem is they were following in the footsteps of those who had created the material, and you can never do justice in the same way that the originators do.
Whoever was sitting, out there or standing out there at the front of the stage always gave their best endeavours to the Purple classics, always. And they never sounded like Gillan. Nobody sounds like Gillan. But they always gave it their best shot. They didn't muck around with it. They didn't dilute it. They didn't try to make it theirs. They just did it in the Purple style. With respect, I think.
If there's one area where Coverdale and Hughes, or that lineup, might let itself down a bit, is in their interpretations of the older style. I mean, Smoke on the Water, for example, just never sounded quite right without Ian Gillan singing it.
Smoke on the Water, for instance, gave Glenn Hughes a chance at the end to do a sort of solo singing spot, which really was completely at odds with the rest of the song. It didn't really fit with it. And on Space Trucking, even though it'd been drawn out live on stage to about 20 minutes, with this lineup, they were taking it on to 30 minutes or so. And again, there was a lot of padding with it and a lot of bits where it lost its continuity.
If you look at Smoke in the Water, for instance, it's a very personal lyric. We all came out to Montreux. Well, David Coverdale wasn't in Montreux when they recorded the album, so he changed it to they all went down to Montreux, or they all came down to Montreux. So it was taking the personal angle out of it, which I thought was very clever. But yeah, of course they would do it justice. You've got Ritchie Blackmore, Ian Pace and John Lord there. How could you not?
I don't particularly like playing old songs from other bands. I considered the band before I joined Deep Purple was Mark II to be another band. I never felt comfortable performing Gillan songs or anybody else I've asked to do, because I want to have my own thing. And Ian's an entirely different singer to Glenn Hughes. He's he's not a soulful singer. He's more of a straight ahead traditional rock singer. So for me to sing Smoke on the Water with Coverdale was kind of a walk in the park for me. It was kind of a straight ahead and it's kind of, I don't know, it's okay. I mean, I didn't really enjoy singing a lot of that stuff. I don't think David did either. And if you ask him the same question, I think he'll give you the same answer.
I think they did do justice to some of the older classics. I mean, I think with any band of the calibre of Deep Purple, when they had Gillan and Glover in the band, it was going to be a real hard act to follow. But they did have Ritchie Blackmore there, and they had John Lord there, of course, two virtuosos, and they had Ian Pace, probably the best drummer in rock of all time. So with the three of them, keeping the tunes rolling, I think that, yeah, they did manage to interpret the songs very well, albeit vastly differently than Gillan and Glover ever would have interpreted them. I think they did a very good job, by and large.
We don't have many bad nights. In fact, since we've started, we've on 3 fingers we've had maybe 3 bad nights. And when we do have a bad night, we don't fight. We just walk off, and we don't speak to each other. And the next day we go on stage. It's like that. We don't ever argue intensely. When we criticise each other, it's always polite criticism. Yeah, you're shit, man. It's necessary to respect each other. It's immensely necessary. Bands have broken up through lack of respect.
They were cocky buggers as well. They were young upstarts. They joined this great rock band, and they thought they were the bee's knees. Now they were. I mean, this is the thing, certainly with Glenn Hughes. I mean, Glenn Hughes knew how good he was.
But I was still a very young lad. I was 21 when I joined Deep Purple. I'm a team player, but I'm also a very strong-voiced person in what I want to do. And I think my foothold in the band as far as being a team player was very obviously, welcomed. But I'm not one to make people feel comfortable, because I don't want comfortable in music. I want always a little danger, and that's what Deep Purple were.
So there would have been a lot of arrogance of, why do we have to do that stuff? Our stuff's better. I'm sure, you know, that kind of thing was going on. And that would have been disappointing, I'm sure, to long-standing Deep Purple fans, to hear the songs that they really loved being portrayed perhaps not with as much heartfelt emotion as, say, the likes of Burn and Stormbringer.
I think by the time the band had got round to recording Stormbringer, which was, I think, just less than a year after they'd done Burn, again the egos had started to creep into the band, and the band had started to fragment. Glenn Hughes was becoming more dominant in his role in the band, and he obviously wanted to steer the band into a different direction.
It was on Stormbringer, there were moments when you'd expect a Blackmore guitar to be there, and there's a John Lord organ solo. And the reason wasn't ego, the reason wasn't even style. The reason was because Blackmore said, I can't be bothered to do a guitar solo, you go out and do an organ solo, John. So I think Blackmore's lack of interest and distance from the band really undermined the album to some extent.
We're not brilliant songwriters, you know. I write most of the stuff, but I think some of it stinks, you know. We only get away with it because we're so good musically, you know. In fact, I wish some people would come forward and write songs for us, because we need it.
Ritchie had pretty much made his mind up, I think, that probably while they were making Burn or on the road with Burn, that his interest started to lie elsewhere. He got this idea to do his own thing, which became Rainbow. And he didn't ever like the blues and the funkier influences that were creeping into the music.
I tend not to get too involved in people because, to be quite honest, I find a lot of people are boring. I find myself boring most of the time. I'm still very moody, shy, and very honest, which a lot of people can't take, you know. Honest? Yeah, and which is the hardest thing in this business is sincerity. Once you can fake that, you're laughing, you know.
He was going through a messy divorce at the time, and his personal life was not in a fantastic situation. So with that lack of drive and enthusiasm from Blackmore, and with Glenn Hughes coming in, it suddenly confused a lot of Deep Purple fans, because the sound was a much lighter sound than they'd been used to before.
We're talking funk rock here now, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant record, and it's, you know, the whole concept of what they were doing is fantastic. I think about it at the time, Stevie Wonder was making really music from the black side that was incorporating rock influences, and here was Purple from the white rock side incorporating that funk thing, and operating, you know, in a kind of middle ground.
It's got its moments. The opening track, Stormbringer, the title song, is a very strong, very powerful, very, very interesting and intricate song as well. And also, later on, Soldier of Fortune was the last track on the album, became a Deep Purple classic. And again, it was a wonderful moment for David Coverdale to show his blues roots.
I have often told you stories about the way I lived a life of a drifter, waiting for the day when I take.
But the rest of the album's a little bit hit and miss. Highball Shooter is quite good in a very sweaty, rocking way. Dealer's a strong track, but in reality, there was too inconsistent.
And it was a very laid-back album, very sort of typical sort of 70s soul come lightweight kind of rock bands that were around at that time, and not really a Deep Purple album.
I don't want to make any rock fan feel comfortable in my whole career. I've always tried to press a button to make them evoke a feeling of, what's this? I cannot sing traditionally straight ahead rock, because my brain doesn't operate like that. I've been given a gift to sing with a sense of security and emotion, that is deeper than most rock singers. Hence they call my voice soulful. And I find regular rock singing to be tedious and boring. I like to keep the melody, but what I sing is not your traditional kind of hard rock. And I don't want to be compared to Ian Gillan at all.
Unfortunately, rock fans can be terribly blinkered. It's their greatest failing sometimes, and they can't see, great music when it's put in front of them if a tiny little part of the equation is changed.
There's one song in particular, Hold On. On that is one of Ritchie Blackmore's greatest solos. I mean, it's just he's obviously doesn't like the song because he played it with his thumb, and he goes in and he just pulls this blinding solo from nowhere. I'm happy if there's a great solo, a great riff, great vocals, great drumming. Whether it's shoeshine music, I don't know. It was Deep Purple for me.
Shoeshine music, yes. What an appalling phrase. You wouldn't get away with that today, would you? Now, to these ears, it's fantastic. Funky heavy rock is brilliant. But, to Ritchie, it wasn't what he wanted.
He's a guy that used the words Glenn Hughes in his shoeshine music and funky, but if you people listen to Stormbringer, please listen. Ritchie Blackmore is damn funky, whether he likes it or not. He played wonderfully on the album. I think at this point he'd had enough of playing. He'd lost his foothold, I think, as far as we were going in a more band direction, as far as Coverdale, Lord Pace and Hughes were. We were going in a new direction, we were growing. Every artist grows. When you take Gillan and Glover out of the scenario, Gillan and Glover are pretty much traditional hard rockers. Coverdale and Hughes were now groovier, soulful rock guys, more influenced by Americans. That's why you have things on Stormbringer like You Can't Do It Right and Holy Man and Hold On. They're more grown-up stuff.
I think David Coverdale said shortly after the album was released that he didn't think it was as rocky as it should be, and that the next one would be a much heavier, rockier album. And Ritchie Blackmore said the same. He didn't like the album, although of course he wasn't to be on the next one. By that time he decided to leave anyway.
There are times when I feel like just saying, oh, let's forget it, let's all go home, and we've all got enough money to just say, well, I'll do another LP when I feel like doing it. Because really that's what every group should do. But every group is pressured by the record company. It's only guarding their own interests. A group only lasts a certain length of time, so they get the most out of them. It doesn't matter whether they fold up in 5 years, as long as they've made about 10 LPs in the meantime. Whereas in actual fact, to get the best out of a group, you've got to give them a year for each LP, I would think, for an actual progression without forcing it. And that really bugs me, actually, going to the studio. Right, we're going to turn out an LP, boys. Here we go, blah, blah, blah. I've got to write a song today, It's just ridiculous, Yeah. And I don't know if I've got the guts to do it, but I've often thought, that's it. I'd like to leave, not the band, I just want to get out of the business, play when I feel like playing, and do a record when I feel like recording. It would be fantastic, but you can't have it all your own way,
When Ritchie's in a band, there's going to be tension and friction, and that's the way it's going to be. And as soon as comfortable things set in, people would move and the tension would shift and people would have to leave or be fired.
I don't think anybody really is the right choice to replace Ritchie Blackmore. You can't really replace Ritchie Blackmore. He's such an integral part, he's such a major part of Deep Purple.
Deep Purple lost their leader, the man who really guided them, their inspiration in many respects. How do you replace somebody like that?
Blackmore wasn't just a great guitarist, he was a great showman and a very enigmatic character as well. Very much a figurehead, for Deep Purple.
What do you do? Who was there around at the time that could have stepped in?
He's not somebody that you're just going to be able to drag a replacement in off the street. But whatever happened, I'm sure they could have done better than Tommy Bowman.
it would be unfair to compare him to Blackmore. Blackmore was more of a technically trained player. Bolin was more played straight out of whatever came out of him. Bit of a jazz influence here and there, bit of a blues, but he also liked to use a lot of special effects, foot pedals and different sounds which Blackmore never went for. Clearly the band wanted to carry on. I think primarily at the time the motivation was financial. The band was still hugely successful. They needed to carry on. There was still a huge market of people.
At the time, Purple were I think they were all living out in LA because they were tax exiles. And unfortunately, Glenn was living the high life a little too much at the time. And Coverdale, I think it was, had discovered Tommy Bolin, and I believe he discovered him on a Billy Cobham album.
And it is quite an awesome guitar performance in a song called Quadrant 4. And we thought, ooh. So it was a very different style, but Tommy Bolin was very adaptable to the Deep Purple style. And he brought in some great riffs.
Tommy Bolin, yes, he was American, but he also had that feel which Glenn Hughes understood. He could play soul, he could play a little bit of funk. He could also drive in a metallic and rock direction brilliantly. He was also young and very hungry. And to my way of thinking, in retrospect, he was a fantastic choice. If only the band could have held themselves together, who knows what would have come out.
For people who really like Purple and have studied his music and so on in recent years, we've realised what a talented artist he actually was. But he was also quite a troubled individual. You know, he was young, not handling the money, certainly not handling the drugs, which of course is what killed him in the end. But live, he was superb. And on Come Taste the Band, I think it's fantastic playing. But I actually do not believe anybody could have replaced Ritchie Blackmore.
All of us in the band were dabbling in intoxication, whether it be drink or drugs. I'm not going to name names, it's not my style. But certain members were doing this and certain members were doing that. But when it came to the shove where people were going to sleep and I was basically still partying with the crew, didn't know I had a problem until Come Taste the Band.
The problem with Come Taste the Band was it was very much the band trying to learn where they were going. They were pushing out the boundaries, they were pushing the envelope a little bit, trying different things, and they were only starting to learn exactly where they could go. Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale were still comparatively new. They had the new guitarist in there, Tommy Bolin. It was taking time to bed everything and everyone down. So there's an inconsistency in Come Taste the Band.
I think Come Taste the Band is an excellent rock album. It's not a Deep Purple album. It's so far removed from what Deep Purple was. They virtually gave Tommy Bolin carte blanche to write all the songs. So suddenly there's this completely new sound that Deep Purple had not had before.
And some of the songs on that album, again, with Coming Home being the first song on Come Taste the Band, the statement of intent is there again, because it starts off like a live Deep Purple concert with a big thrashing chord and Ian Pace hammering away on the drums, and it's just going off, it's just going off. And then it builds into this, well, it's just a 12-bar boogie rock and roll song, but it's a heavy rock and roll song.
It has its moments. You Keep On Moving is wonderful. It's such a haunting, moody, marvellous melody. And I think Coming Home, which opens the album, is a fine track as well. Love Child later on, Lady Double Dealer. These are good songs. But the inconsistency on the record is almost to be expected, because Purple were learning to come to terms with each other. Mark IV was a completely new band, and without the rudder that was Ritchie Blackmore, they suddenly had to look around and think, where are we going? How are we going to get there?
But nevertheless, it was a great rock album. It's far more rockier than Stormbringer had been. Bolin's guitar work on it is fine. There's massive overdubs, lots of heavy guitar work, lots of great solos. But as I say, it's not a Deep Purple album.
I think Come Taste the Band is as crisp and as fresh a sounding album today as it was then. And I can still put it on and listen to it and just think how well Martin Birch captured that sound. Because obviously these guys, in the same way that they had to lift after Gillan and Glover went, they had to lift themselves again after Ritchie left. And I think it really worked.
Come Taste the Band, fucking great album, really was. It's a really good album, but I think it's an underrated album today. It's got probably a better collection of songs on it in general than Stormbringer, and it's more cohesive as an album actually than Burn. But it's a little bit forgotten, probably because time was running on for Deep Purple. Punk was just starting to hit the streets when they were sort of midway through touring that, and of course Purple split up in 1976. But yeah, I think it's a good album, but I think it didn't get the momentum tour-wise or sales-wise and probably marketing-wise from the record company that the previous two albums had had.
The Purple audience was on the downturn, obviously, by the time Come Taste the Band came out. And they knew themselves it was grinding to a halt. Bolin had substance abuse problems, so did Hughes. They weren't all saints, but Hughes and Bolin were taking it to another level, and it was getting bad. You want to hear the regret with which John Lord talks about how Purple ground to a halt at this particular point in time. And you really can feel his regret at, maybe they shouldn't have carried it on. But, we're left with an album, Come Taste the Band, which I think is a phenomenally good piece of work.
I went home 80% into the album. I completed most of my stuff, but they recorded Coming Home without me because I'd actually had a bit of a meltdown on the 18th floor of the Arabella Hotel, where I confronted a couple of my guys in the crew due to my intoxication behind cocaine. A good call on the band to send me back to the UK to do a little rehab. When I got a copy of Come Taste the Band, there was a song called The Dealer, which I'd sang called Something Else, where I got a copy of the master, and Dealer comes on, I'm starting to start, and here comes David's voice, singing a whole new lyric, which they'd taken my voice off, which blew me away, because my version was bitching. And, of course, coming home, when I heard the opening of the album, I'm going, wait a minute, I don't remember being on that song.
It really doesn't matter how good the music's made if the guys can't perform.
I don't want to sound twee or anything, or trite. Oh, it will, but it's not intended to. You do seriously feel an immense necessity to be good. And it stems from the fact that you are being paid by a lot of people to excel and to excite them. And if you know you're not doing it, I get so brought down. It's amazing how just doomy you can get. You can walk off stage and literally be in tears. We started this band with one main idea and ideal, and that was that everything we did would be, by our lights, excellent.
A lot of people in their 20s died of drug abuse, like Tommy and my brother Paul Kossoff and other guys that died. I scraped myself up the gates of insanity quite a couple of times. But I'm proud of the work I did in Deep Purple.
Tommy Bolin never had the chance really to perform in Deep Purple for two reasons. Firstly, Purple fans, especially in the UK, wouldn't accept him. A, he wasn't English, or British specifically. B, he wasn't Ritchie Blackmore, who was the hero, the guitar god. Second problem, he had a major drug addiction crisis. So he never really got the chance to perform in the way that he possibly would have liked to with Deep Purple. So I don't think anybody really saw how good Tommy Bolin may or may not have been live with Purple.
I saw Deep Purple at the Glasgow Apollo, 14th of March 1976, 7 days after my birthday. And I was blown away. But I mean, I was only a kid. I was blown away. I'd never seen them before. I was reveling in the fact that these guys were on the stage. And Tommy Bolin looked great, and I thought he played well. I've never heard a bootleg of the show. There were lots of calls for Blackmore. I don't think that it helped that Glenn Hughes introduced him as the greatest guitar player in the world. You know, that wasn't going to work. But it was a powerful, I had never heard anything as loud in my life. But it was really, it was really good. And to see Deep Purple with Tommy Bolin was very special for me, as a wee boy, you know.
When he came into playing in the UK audiences, they really were die-hard Blackmore fanatics, and when it came to his sort of 5-minute solo spot, sometimes he would just freeze because there was people in the audience shouting out for Blackmore, and that put him on edge and unnerved him and so forth.
There was nothing charismatic about him on stage, whereas Blackmore, not if you like a particularly handsome man, Bolin, beautiful man, right? Blackmore was charismatic. Utterly charismatic. The shapes that he throws, the way he moves, the expression on his face, the dynamism in his fingers. Bolin didn't have any of that.
He was very static. I always remember him standing like a gunslinger with his legs splayed wide apart and the guitar sort of down crotch level, and he just stood with a hat on and his t-shirt saying "The Ultimate," which, you know, he was stating his intent as well. And I enjoyed it. I mean, I don't think that he played the older Purple stuff as well as he did the Purple material that he wrote for Come Taste the Band, which he played exceptionally well. And I liked the fact that he repeated several phrases within his solos. And I thought he was an amazing replacement. A lot of people don't agree.
Tommy Bolin's substance abuses were legendary, were legion. They were eventually to kill him, and it obviously affected the way he performed. There's one legendary story when Purple, with Bolin, toured in Japan, and Bolin got so messed up on heroin that he couldn't move his hand, his left hand. He had to go on stage, he could barely play.
Bolin was just playing these sort of bar chords and not playing the riff, and it really was quite sad that he'd allowed himself to succumb to that, because the talent was there. But I think it was, you know, partly the pressure of being in Deep Purple and replacing Ritchie Blackmore, which, got him further into himself. He just couldn't cope with that because Blackmore was such a huge iconic figure within Deep Purple.
I liked Tommy Bolin on stage. I thought he was very good. And the one thing I really admired about him, you know, when I saw him live, and of course when you know what's happened after his death and so on, he never tried to copy Ritchie Blackmore. I think he actually realised that Blackmore was an uncopyable person, and he went out and did his own thing.
Glenn Hughes had his own problems. Hughes and Bolin drove each other on. So you have these two just doing copious amounts of drugs and not really dealing with the situation, and nobody else in the band felt strong enough to actually grab them.
The Deep Purple period from towards the end was becoming boring for me. I was becoming boring playing that kind of music. It was kind of tired.
To play well, I think you need to be kind of left alone so that you can focus everything you do on what you're doing. Even that can be a solo thing or interacting with a band or whatever. And I've buried mates of mine through substance abuse. I've paid for their funerals. I've been at their funerals. And you know, it doesn't work, man. It does not work. And I don't know, no musician has ever told me that, yeah, it's great. I was great during that era. Most of them go, I was crap. I didn't know what I was doing.
Glenn Hughes told me that he didn't realise that that Bolin was on heroin. Obviously, there was a lot of cocaine abuse going around at the time, but I mean, you know, let's get this into perspective here. We are talking about one of the biggest rock bands in the world. You know, they weren't the only guys who were doing this. It was rife, still is. You know, it just goes hand in hand with the territory. So they were only doing what everyone else was doing, but when heroin got involved, you know, you're on a downward slope, and that's what happened with Purple. How can a band operate, you know, successfully or maintain a level of success when you've got this kind of, you know, rot basically running through it? So you can't just point the finger of blame at Tommy Bolin for this, because he wasn't the only guy in the band that was, you know, that was messed up.
Just wild dogs howling in the night. Oh, that's what I like. They hold a calm and cut me loose.
Sadly, Last Concert in Japan is the least successful of the live Deep Purple albums. The band was never really happy with it, primarily because it was recorded on a night when Tommy Bolin was suffering due to his substance abuse.
Last Concert in Japan is an absolute mess. It's hideous. It's Deep Purple falling apart. As I think members of the band have said, you can listen to the album and you can hear the sound of a band breaking up. They just lost all direction. They had no focus anymore.
I think it's probably the worst live performance that they have done. I mean, the playing is actually not bad, but Tommy Bolin's guitar playing is almost non-existent. So of course you've got a four-piece band without one of the most important members playing.
It doesn't really hang together very well. I think Martin Birch, who again put it together, did the best job he could by stripping it down to only a 40-minute, 50-minute single album and cutting out a lot of the bits of the show that really didn't work at all. But the band wasn't that happy with it, which explains why it was never released in the UK or America, only in Japan and Europe.
ground to a halt, I think, up in Liverpool, maybe Royal Court, I think in Liverpool, where Hughes was so out of it, he didn't know where he was, you know, and there were tears afterwards, and I think, you know, Pace and Lord, that's it. You know, no more, I'm out, and it was, you know, a terrible way for such a great and gracious rock band to sort of finally ground to a halt. Obviously, they got resurrected again in the 80s, but you know, that was it for the time being. One of the rock giants comes to such a sorry demise.
They probably had enough of mine and Tommy's boys' nights. I'm not going to tell you that we had a great time, Tommy and I, cavorting around the globe, stoned, because it wasn't great. But I said there are other issues that broke the band up, which probably nobody will talk about, and I won't talk about it either. But there's a lot of bizarre things going on there.
Purple was a band that clearly was past its best. It was fragmenting. It was really only going in one way. Whereas by this time, Ritchie Blackmore was putting together a formidable outfit with Rainbow. And if Purple was on the slide, Blackmore's band was on the way up.
He had Ronnie Deere on vocals, who was quite magnificent. An exciting, energetic band around him. He was moving in a direction he felt comfortable with, very classically oriented, very much traditional hard rock, while Purple were going off the rails completely.
Obviously, Blackmore had stolen the march. He was the guy with the ideas, he was the guy with the vision, and he was a legendary guitarist. So naturally, Rainbow were very quickly going to overtake the ailing Deep Purple. I think it was a very shrewd move on the part of Lord and Pace to suspend Deep Purple at that time, because when it eventually came back in the 80s, everyone was glad to see them again.
As the spirits appear